Okay, perfect. We are live on Wisdom here, our special event tonight talking about designing your 2022, our special recording of the Connection Point podcast. And much like our previous episode, where we brought some of my closest friends into the conversation, I'm going to be bringing 4 guests tonight with what I assume to be some of the best conversations that have happened in a very long time. I've really, with a focused intention, asked 4 people from different walks of life, different backgrounds, different experiences to come share with us how they approach designing life. And we're going to be talking about designing 2022. So many folks talk about New Year's resolutions. I like to have great conversations with people who walk me step by step through how they build their lives with intention. You know, within our community, we've talked about what it means to live with love, intention, vision, and embodiment. And I am really, really grateful because each one of these people lives that in their own way. And so I'm not going to waste any time. You know, if you want to share this out with everybody, if you're listening live here on Wisdom, share this out, bring some people into the conversation. If you have any questions that you would like to ask as well, feel free to DM me on Instagram. It's one of the benefits of being live. I can ask some questions of our guests, but I can't believe the list of guests that we have tonight. So before we bring in our first guest, you know, if you've been on Wisdom since the beginning back in September, you've heard her speak before. She is somebody who has literally embodied the idea of wisdom. And when I saw this app come out, I messaged her immediately and said, I think this is an app that you're really, really going to do well with because she embodies this idea of wisdom. But Dr. Elizabeth Lindsay is the first Polynesian explorer and female fellow in the history of the National Geographic Society. She's a cultural anthropologist and award-winning filmmaker, and she travels extensively as a conservationist of indigenous wisdom, as an advocate for social, environmental, and cultural justice. And I've come to know Dr. Elizabeth through a chance encounter on Clubhouse of all places, where she popped in and listened to a conversation around our community of what it means to start your day with intention. I had no idea that our paths would cross, that they would intertwine and we become such close friends. I've learned so much from her and her husband, George, and I'm so deeply grateful to have her as our first guest tonight and to share her wisdom with us. So I'm going to go ahead and bring Dr. Elizabeth up to the living room.
Hi, Chris.
Dr. Elizabeth, how are you?
So great to be with you.
This is exciting. We had a little bit of a technical snafu for a second, but that's what happens when you're on the edge and wayfinding, as you like to say, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's no better way.
I love this. And, you know, there's so many different directions I want to go with you in this conversation. But I told all of our guests that this is stream of consciousness, so nobody knows I'm going to ask. So this is as open as it can possibly be. But I want to start with the idea of when you heard me ask you the question of what you want to talk about, designing your 2022. What was the immediate thought that came up for you?
Wayfinding, for sure. And for people who don't know what wayfinding is, it's an ancient science that was used in cultures that didn't have maps or instruments. And so they found their way by marrying both their reason and their intuition. And it's really this beautiful and precise ancient science.
And that's, I'm so grateful we're going to be talking about this too, because the idea of wayfinding sounds so intuitive, and that we've shared so many spaces where you've talked extensively about some of the applications from some of the explorers and the mentors. Can you share a little bit about kind of your background growing up as a child and how that's intertwined with the work that you do today?
Oh, I'd be so happy to. So I was raised on the North Shore of Oahu, which is a very small and very humble community. It's surrounded by sugarcane fields. And my parents were both teachers. And so during the day, they left us in the care of these 3 old Hawaiian women. And on the surface, for people that didn't have a really sensitive state of being or were not aware, what they saw were 3 very poor women who farmed and fished. But in reality, these women were among the most powerful people that I've ever known. And I've known some extraordinary teachers throughout the world. But these 3 women walked a very humble path. They knew who they were, and they always said, you have the ability to chant the universe. And what they meant by that was that we each have the capacity to lean in and create destinies, to co-create with the divine, however people define that. And so they were my first teachers. And I watched them at the ocean under certain and very specific moon cycles, lunar cycles, where they'd go and fish. and they'd go and start to chant, and you could see the fish coming towards shore. And then they'd go knee high into the ocean and then gather only what we needed, and we would leave. We would mahalo the ocean. We would thank all of the resources, and then we would head home and prepare our meal. And that's the way I was raised, is that we lived so intimately with the natural world. And so that was the beginning of my journey into wisdom, into this deep place of knowing that each of us have an integral part to play in our destinies and in the destiny of humanity.
You know, I've every single time you mention about it too, it just comes up. And what a special way to grow up, to be taught this deep, intimate relationship with nature and the spirit of everything. And as you've gotten older, you know, you've had this incredible career that continues to grow, and your impact that you're growing as well. How have you taken, you know, this idea of wisdom that you've learned and made it practical for yourself in this modern age? And then let's kind of segue into, we'll talk a little bit more about how you use this to kind of design your life, because you and George have practices that I love. So
Yeah.
how have you really brought this with you as you've aged, as you've gotten older, and you know, brought it to the world, you know, in terms of a world that is potentially, you know, a lot of times we have this abstract knowledge, but the world is making us make it more practical. So
Sure.
what do you think you've done with it?
Well, you know, it is very interesting because these principles on the surface, they seem esoteric, yet these are, you know, eternal precepts of walking a path with great humility and mastery. So what I've done in a very practical way is I created a compass for myself where north is constructed by my guiding principles, you know, what I stand for, who I am in the world, and what brings me most alive. So that's my North Star, because that's the star that's always seen in the Northern Hemisphere. You never lose track of it. It becomes my beacon. And then my Eastern quadrant is courage, is the courage to lean into the unknown, to explore, to be willing to go into places and to look at life, you know, look at it in a very personal and real way and ask myself, am I living the life that I have come to live, or am I living someone else's opinion of who I should be or who I ought to be, or someone else's idea for success? And this, all of this applies to, you know, your topic of designing 2022. And then my southern quadrant is self-mastery. And it's following that North Star with the courage and the inquiry and the willingness to sail into storms and to face obstacles and challenges. And then the last quadrant, which is west, which is where the sun sets, for me is love. That is ultimately where I am going with all of this. But it requires a North Star that's filled with wisdom and is my guiding light, the courage to follow it, the self-mastery to face storms and endure them and to flourish and become stronger because of them, and then carry back whatever I have learned for present and future generations. And that is the compass that guides me. And that's for my day, it's for my month, it's for my new year, and it's certainly long term.
I love this. You know, I find that the people that I meet who are doing something of significance in this world, and it doesn't require, you know, if you're listening to this, it doesn't require you to do something of massive scale. You could be doing something very significant in your day-to-day life just by working with your vibration. But I find that we have some kind of what you call the compass. We have some kind of guidance, principles, values that we've worked with for life. And I want to reiterate what you said, because I thought this is so beautiful and so interesting. And I want to see if I got this right. So the north is the guiding star, really the wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
The east is for exploration. And you said, am I living the life I've come to live?
Mm-hmm.
And I love the fact that you ask a question there, because that requires reflection. You said south is self-mastery,
Mm-hmm.
following the North Star with courage, and the west is love. Where am I going with all of this? Was that
Right.
accurate?
And yes. And it's always, at least for myself, it's always for a greater purpose than myself. You know,
Mm-hmm.
when you're growing up in a community with elders, there was always a bigger reason. you know? And the bigger reason can be as humble as kindness, you know,
Mm.
in anonymity. It doesn't have to be something that gains recognition or any of that. In fact, in my experience of being with these elders and masters from around the world, the greatest masters I've always known were always the most quiet. They were at the back of the room. They needed nothing, completely sovereign into themselves.
I've always enjoyed that concept because that's such a hard thing to understand, is to have all this wisdom but then not share it, to be um, not restricted but rather that idea of, like, let me ask you this: can you explain what sovereignty is in your own words? I would love to start
Sure.
there, actually.
Sure. Sovereignty, we have a word in Hawaiian. It's called ea, E-A, and it's my favorite word in our language because it's personal sovereignty. So the best description of that was Nelson Mandela being in a cell and being a free man at the same time. So personal sovereignty has nothing to do with anyone else. It's when you can step into wherever you are and shift a field by your presence and your consciousness. That is sovereignty. It's complete liberation that requires nothing of anyone else.
How would you suggest somebody who hears this begin to seek that for themselves and begin to go on the exploration to understand that for themselves?
Mm-hmm. It requires inquiry for people to really. I believe that the way that we lean into this is by spending time separated from our devices and technology, giving ourselves some time, nature preferably, silence certainly, but giving ourselves time to be alone with ourselves, to really look at what it is that's driving us, motivating us, inspiring us, moving us forward, and really ask the question: if what we are doing is driven by our heart and our soul, or is it driven by something outside ourselves? You know, and I always invite people to come home to something to begin with the core of who they are. Because when we work from that place, from the inside out, we know that it's true. We're not climbing someone else's ladder. The dog is not wagging, the tail is not wagging the dog, which, I find that people are off to the races without ever really knowing for certain if that's the race they want to run. They're climbing a ladder, but not necessarily the ladder they ultimately want to be on. And then they get to a point in their lives where they go through a dark night of the soul because it's not what they were after. It doesn't
Yeah.
bring them joy. It doesn't bring them any sense of fulfillment. So always, this is probably the most efficient way for us to live, is to first really understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and that it's true to who we are. That is sovereignty, sovereignty 101. It's like, do what brings you most alive. I love, what Howard Thurman said. Don't ask what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive. Then go and do that. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. And, what we're finding right now, because it can be so seductive with social media and all of that, that we start to adopt measurements that are really not our own. We're measuring numbers of followers and audiences and so forth. And the question becomes, who are you and why are you here? What
Yeah.
is it? What is it that really brings you alive? And that requires us to have the courage to step back long enough and say, is this mine? Is this dream mine? And I really believe that once we get clear on that, then everything else starts to follow. Because when we are true to that path, it's like Joseph Campbell says, what you seek is seeking you. And
Mm.
we do not attract what we want, we attract what we are, but we have to be true to that. Or else we're going to attract things that really we don't want. But it's not until we're very clear. So it's clarifying what brings us alive and what it is we stand for. That is the North Star. That is your guiding principle. And, it's subjective. People have to determine that for themselves.
Love that. We share a common love for this idea of the hero, and you talk about the heroine's journey, and it was a Joseph Campbell quote that I saw on a tapestry when I went and got a massage. Actually, it was in 2014 actually, and I was leaving New York and I was heading to Georgia, and I thought that I was taking this promotion to further my career, and it said, once you let go of the life that you had planned, you'll find the life that was waiting for you all along. And I remember
Yes.
talking to this woman who was about to do this massage, and I was totally closed off to it because I'd never had body work done before. And she said, "You're about to turn 30, and at 30, it's a third and it's the three, and so things begin to shift radically." I had no idea within the next 2 years, 3 years, I would be on this journey of the dark night of the soul that happened. Is there a moment in your life when you came to that recollection? Was there ever a time in which you found yourself on a certain path and then came to this reflection point where you had to make a choice and pursue exactly what you're talking about right now?
Yes. I was 50, and my husband died just a month after my 50th birthday. And I had been raised by these elders, and he said to me just before he passed away, he said, "When I'm gone, you'll return to the life you were meant to live," because he knew that I had made a commitment to our marriage, and that became a priority for me. And I let my dreams linger on the side. It's not that I wasn't passionate about them. It's just that I knew that I had, this marriage that I was committing myself to. And so that became secondary. And after he passed away, there was a process of grieving, and it was a grieving for a lot of things. And it was also a cracking open, because what happened, and I know you understand this because you've experienced loss with such magnitude, but what happens is that it shatters your heart open in 1,000 different ways. And so all of a sudden I felt this expanded compassion. I've always felt compassionate, but it was like I was so raw that all I wanted to do was love the world from a really raw place, not someone who knew any answers, but from someone who was learning about herself in a new way and trying to find her way. And from that really raw and vulnerable place, I started to feel in ways that I hadn't felt before. And I thought, I am going to dedicate myself. I may grow into this very old woman with long white hair and sleep under the stars. And I just want to listen to wisdom and then share whatever wisdom I am given with whoever is interested in hearing it. And that became my passion. And it took this heartbreak, and it took this heart shattering open for me to start to feel at a depth that I'd never felt before.
Mm. Mm. Such a beautiful thing to hear somebody. And for those who are paying attention, the reason why I love social audio in general is because you can hear the voice of somebody who has spent time integrating the lessons and is looking for meaning. And one thing I love about what you share is you're taking your personal experience through your journey and making meaning of it and creating impact. There's something I would love for you to share about. You have some very ambitious, continually ambitious desires and for impact in the world. I know you want to do something particularly to really bring attention to women. And I would love, if you don't mind, to share a little bit about what that drive is and why it's so meaningful to you.
I'd be happy to, and thank you for asking, because it's not something that I talk about. I'm still working through it and developing and designing it right now. But I'm 66 years old, and when I think about my mentors and those who have given me so much, I ask myself, what can I offer? And there are women like me who feel as if being in a society where so much attention is given and so much worth is placed on youth and youthfulness. There are many women my age who feel as though they're becoming more and more irrelevant and more marginalized. And my feeling is we are in a position that we can really become more of who we were meant to be, because there are young women behind us who really need the kind of mentoring and compassion so that they don't have to endure a really winding and meandering road, but we can help them on their journey. So my promise and my commitment is to work with women and to really help them become all of who they've come to be and express themselves fully. As I talk with women, because as an anthropologist, I really love just the deep inquiry of where people are. And it's a lot like you in many ways, Chris. You and I are so similar. And, I hear where women are struggling, where they say, Elizabeth, I just feel like I've never lived the life I've come to live. And I feel like it's too late for me. I feel like I'm over the hill and it just never happened. And then some of them are really, they're embarrassed that they haven't lived more fully. They don't know how. They don't know exactly how to apply all of this. So I'm in process right now putting this together. And then ultimately what I would like to do, because I see that on the heroine's journey, she actually comes into her full power when she integrates and embodies both the masculine and the feminine. And then she carries this treasure into the world. And so it's the integration and embodiment. We really come to embrace both of them. And it's not even a gender issue. It's simply our willingness and our daring to bring it all together and say, this is all of who I am. With all of its imperfections, I am always in process. And I will fall and I will bruise myself and I will get up, because I know that this journey is bigger than me. And I remember that when I was leading my first expedition, it turned out to be the most dangerous expedition I led, I remember a Joseph Campbell quote that carried me through that entire experience. And he said, if you take one step toward the gods, they will take 10 steps toward you. And so every day when I meet myself, especially getting ready to go into 2022, I am committed to making this new year my masterpiece in a way that I've never done before. And in order to do that, the quality of this year will be defined by the quality of my days. And so this morning, my husband, George, whom you mentioned earlier, we are setting up this practice of setting our intention. And I know that you are a master of intention, setting our intention for the masterpiece of this day. And so we started our day. What does that look like for you? What does that mean to you? And it's not a to-do list, but it is our desired end result. And at the end of this day, we meet back again for a review. And we've never done this in such a deliberate way, but we thought, this is no dress rehearsal for us. And at 66 and George is 70, that, that this is too important for us to just let it be another day that blends into every other day. And we're just not going to squander it.
I love this idea of the question, how are you making this year your masterpiece? There's something so meaningful about the language that you choose and the way that you're asking these questions that opens up so much in just even the idea, the curiosity behind it. I have an aside question. I don't know why, but have you ever seen the movie Life Itself?
No.
We just watched it. Kash and I did actually 2 nights ago, and I was talking to Megan and to Crystal about this. I think that you and George would really enjoy it, and the reason is it's one of those movies that you watch and it brings you so into the present of how fragile life is. In the first 30 minutes, it's very intense. It's a story of love and deep loss, but then it intertwines with generationally in the same family lines of how these things play out through their family. And it starts with a couple. and how their families are impacted. And then it spans continents too, which is fascinating. It's a great cast of characters, but the movie is beautiful, and it talks about the narration of our lives.
Wow.
And the way you're talking about your life and how you and George are doing this, it's so simple yet so profound, because we're coming into the space of, people are going to, this year, in this last 6 months, people are quitting their jobs, people are trying to figure this whole entire thing out.
Mm-hmm.
And the last 2 years, it's hard to believe that we've been in a quote unquote pandemic, that now people are being confronted with what they've been avoiding for such a long time.
Yes.
And so I love the fact that you're bringing these reflections and these questions, and about this idea of what does it look like as an end result, not in how it manifests, but rather the experience of that day, and then just coming back and talking about it. That's such a powerful
Yes.
practice.
Well, and I know that I shared this with you privately. George and I put ourselves through a process a week or two ago
Mm.
where we actually reflected on the end of our lives, and we each wrote a eulogy. And that was a really powerful experience because I'd never done it before, nor had he. But what we did was, what would be the greatest, most audacious imagining you could hold for your life? Now, right from there. And it reminded us that life is finite. So I love this recommendation of a film that you offered, and we'll be sure to watch it. And then when we saw the possibilities of our great dreams, and we both knew how audacious each of our dreams were, then we started to chunk them down into our 10-year vision, then a 5-year, and then a 1 year. And the 1 year was exceptional because it basically served as a North Star for 2022, because we weren't just working off of a year to make a year a masterpiece. We were designing this year based on a lifetime that we are visioning into. So the year becomes part of that trajectory.
I couldn't think of a better way to begin to wrap up our time together in what you just shared. Oh man. Um, Dr. Elizabeth, what is the best way for folks? We've gotten so many people live reacting to what you shared about your mission, and how can people support, and where's the best way for them to connect with you?
Oh, thank you for asking. First, thank you for having me on as a guest. It's always such a privilege to be with you, Chris Delaney. The best way will be on my website, because that way I can actually interact with people. I mean, they can reach me, and that's at elizabethlindsay.com. And the second best way would be on Instagram, because they can also DM me, and that's at dr.elizabethlindsay.
I love it, my friends. I know that we get to talk to each other abundantly on wisdom, and I can't wait to do more. And for those of you listening, what a treat. We still have 3 more guests to come to the table, but I want to say a huge, huge amount of gratitude to you, Dr. Elizabeth. You were the first person to respond. You were the one who led the conversation courageously. And I want to say, huge love to you and to George. And it's always a huge debt of gratitude to have some space with you.
Thank you. And I'm always here for you. Anything you need. Thank you very much for having me. My love to you.
I love it, Dr. Elizabeth. I will talk to you soon. I'm going to go ahead, and we have our next guest, which I'm excited because it's her first time on Wisdom. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go ahead and swap out in just a second. But man, I'm taking notes during this conversation. I'm being as present as I possibly can, but I am just as much. I treat every interaction with my friends as a new experience, and what I've learned from Dr. Elizabeth about her north, east, south, and west, her guiding star, her exploration, self mastery, and her love as her compass for life is incredible. We're gonna put all this stuff into our show notes when this podcast episode goes live. And then, of course, make sure you're connecting with Dr. Elizabeth here on Wisdom, as well as on Instagram. And come home to the core of who you are and create the masterpiece of your life. And that's just our first guest for tonight. I am super stoked to to bring my good friend Miranda to the stage, into the living room, I should say. She is no stranger to conversations together. We have a blast together. She is so much fun. But here's a little bit about Maranda Joiner. She's a brand strategist, author, and speaker who quit her job in 2018 to pursue her dream to help people feel seen without guilt or shame so they can run into success with confidence. She's the author of A Lot Alike and has also consulted and served as the brand manager for talent, placing them in a position to perform at Essence on Comedy Central and True TV. She currently serves as a board member of the American Advertising Federation of Jackson, and she worked as an on-air radio personality for 14 years, and for 7 years curated and hosted an open mic experience called Synergy Nights. She is hilarious. She can also get super deep. She's very knowledgeable and one of my favorite people I've gotten to meet this year because of social audio. Let's go ahead and welcome Miranda to the living room and see how she's going to design her 2022. There she is.
Hello. Are we live?
We are live, my friend. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and good night.
I was just thinking about you yesterday
Yeah.
because I had was it yesterday actually? Hold on one second. I would not fib, but no, it was Saturday.
Chris, can we not pretend that you don't think about me every day?
Well, it does happen a lot, but I happened to see some Chick-fil-A sauce at the store.
I love it. I love it.
I love it. So 2021 was a wild year. We met
Yes.
on Clubhouse. You have a huge club on Clubhouse still to this day with A Lot Alike. Can you
Yeah.
explain what it means to be a lot alike?
Oh man, what it means to be a lot alike. I think it is the thread that holds us all together. And for me, a lot of like being the name of one the club and the book and some events that I've done, it is to me the constant reminder that when we feel alone in our struggles and in our triumphs, right? That we're all very similar. There's always something holding us and piecing us together with other people. And so many times we suffer in silence and shame, and we often don't want to share those things because we're scared of being vulnerable. We're scared to be seen. We're scared of judgment. And while those things exist in the space of being judged, it's just the reminder that there are more people that can relate to us and that want to uplift us and love us and connect to us than there are that are judging us. And those are the people that we should stay open for, that we should be open for and be vulnerable and say, okay, I know there's a tribe out there for me to connect to. I know there is, excuse me, a group of people that I can connect to that will help me to get back to the place that I need to get to, because ultimately we were created to be connected to one another. And so that's what I mean by a lot of like.
I love it. When the first time that I met you and we started to share some spaces, I just remember how laid back, but also your ability to like create a space was just like amazing. And you talked about like these mic nights and everything else. Can you, for those who haven't been on like social audio, can you explain like what that dynamic's like and what you experienced when you first started?
So the dynamic of running an open mic or being on Clubhouse, which one?
Well, I mean, let's go with open with social audio first, like Clubhouse, and then what's similar and what's different from like an open mic night.
Oh, well, yeah. So, oh my, that's a loaded question there. So my background, as you mentioned before, is in radio. So for me, really understanding the theater of the mind and being able to really grasp and have years and years of practice of understanding how to draw people in with your voice, with your inflection, with your tone, with your energy, right? Is something that I think is extremely important when it comes to this audio world. You can always tell the gauge where people are. Either they're way too low, they're on E, and they're struggling. And E doesn't necessarily mean that your volume is high and that you're super animated, because the Dr. Elizabeth, who just got off of here, her energy is very drawing, but her voice is very light. It's very soft, right? And so it's the energy that she carries that brings you into her conversation and that draws you in. So it's a lot more than the actual, the tone of your voice, but it's the energy that is attached to it. And that realistically, the people who really grasp it and do it well understand that that comes from within, no matter what volume is attached to your personality, because that's really what matters, right? So I'm a little bit more animated. I was born in the summer. I'm a Leo, so there's a lot of light, right? A lot of extra. And, for somebody else, they could still have this same draw and energy, but it could be a softer tone, as, like I said, like Dr. Elizabeth, who just left. And so for me, the experience with it was really understanding that when I enter into a space when the mic comes on, that is my moment to draw people in with my voice and the energy. I've always considered myself a person that can manage energy, always. And in the open mic space that I ran an open mic for several years, and we would average about 80 to 100 people where we would have so many things going on. But the beautiful thing about the open mic that I ran is that the audience felt just as much a part of the show as the open micers and the people who were on stage. And so that ability to be able to connect the audience to me and to the stage and to what was happening was the brilliance and the beauty of what I felt like I did for 3 hours. And honestly, at the end of it, every night I was exhausted. It was like, all right, everybody, bye. And, I could literally collapse on the stage because outside of just physically being present, I understood that I was managing energy. I was so attuned to when the energy was getting low and people were kind of losing focus. And then I had things that I would do in those moments to energize the audience and the energy. We would play this game that would get the audience involved and they would be right back up. And so it was a roller coaster of riding the waves that people come in there on. And every night was different, right? And so I always had to be open to say, okay, what kind of crowd do I have now? And honestly, that prepared me for, in a similarity to being in Clubhouse, right? Because sometimes you could have a room that will be so dynamic and so charged, and you have all these, big people coming in, and, you have all these characters on stage. And then sometimes you get a stage and it's like pulling teeth to get people to get on, or sometimes people could come with negative energy and you would have to figure out how to manipulate that energy to fit into the space and then to continue with what's happening on a high vibration. So in those ways, it's similar because everything at the end of the day is about managing the energy of people. It's about managing your own energy, about not letting their energy affect yours as the person who is leading the conversation. And so I would say that those are like the parallels that I could name just off the top of my head.
I love it. That's powerful.
Powerful.
That was our intervention technique on Clubhouse when folks were finding their way and we were managing some energy. But and I want to get back to that management of energy piece because I think that's going to tie into our creation of 2022. But I want so many folks. So I think the number is like 4.5 to 5 million people who quit their jobs in September of 2021.
Oh, wow.
You quit yours in 2018. I quit mine in 2016. What led you to quit your job, and were you prepared for the journey you were about to take?
Yeah. So what led me to quit my job? I didn't want to work for the man anymore, Chris. No, I'm just kidding. Honestly, I have always felt a desire to work for myself. I grew up in a single parent home. My mother and my grandmother raised me. And these women were extremely dynamic. Neither one of them are, they're no longer with me here on this earth, but I feel them every single day of my life. They're here so present with me, with their energy and their spirit. But I didn't have an example of what an entrepreneur looked like in my house. They worked extremely hard. My mother was a teacher for 33 years in public schools. My grandmother worked at a plant for 22 years. These women were resilient and consistent. That's what they taught me. Consistency and resilience, right? And I love that. But I always was like the one that was like, I just want to do my own thing. And so really getting to a place of spending my teen years and my 20s doing what everybody said you were supposed to do, because honestly, I was scared to take a chance on myself. And when I got into my mid to late 30s, it was the moment where I was doing other things that I got in a position. I mean, not to go into all the details of what was happening, unless you want those details. But honestly, I ended up sitting at a job that was like an in-between job for me. I had left radio because there was a ceiling there and I knew I couldn't go any further. I had shifted and got excited about working for a nonprofit as a public relations specialist. I was super excited about that because nobody told me what working for a nonprofit was like. So I spent 6 months there and said, oh, no, thank you. I'm going to jump out of here and do something else. Well, in the midst of that, in addition to those jobs that I had, I was also working on the side with an artist, a talent, helping her to build her career. And that was going exceptionally well. And so in the in-between job, I got a part-time job with an old boss of mine to just kind of figure out what I want to do next. And it was in that part-time job at a service desk in the service department of a car dealership where the epiphany happened. And it said, you know what, Miranda, if you don't do it now, I mean, there's no other time like now, because the ties had shifted, the management had changed, and he was rather ruthless. And it was almost as if the universe was saying, all right, there's nothing else for you to land on, so try yourself. And I made that leap on September. It was a Saturday. I'll never forget it. It was September 22nd. And he had been ignoring me that day. He had got a little snooty with me. And I politely, in the most loving way, just grabbed him stopped him as he was walking by and said, you know, I was going to do 2 weeks, but I think today is going to be my last day. And, and this guy who I had been trying to talk to and explain to him the arrangement that I had with our previous boss, because I did a lot of traveling with the talent I was working with, and they allowed me that grace. I kept trying to grab him to have the conversation. And for literally more than a week of time, he had just been brushing me off and would not have a conversation with me. But the moment I decided to quit was the moment that he realized the value of who I was, because he came in the office and then all of a sudden he wanted to know all of the things about who I was and what I did. He even offered me his phone. He gave me his phone number, told me to think about it over the weekend and to come back, because then he was telling me how he felt like I was of value. And I'm not exaggerating. This was a guy who barely said 3 or 4 words to me. And and just refused to sit down and have a conversation with me. So it was in that moment that I realized 2 things happened in that moment. One, that feels really empowering, right? Because then the ties are shifting. So there's that, that flex. But also it really shined a light on my value, right? Like for me, it was the moment, it was a reminder of, Miranda, you are valuable. Whether somebody can treat you like you're not, and the moment they think they don't have you anymore, it's like, oh no, you are valuable. I do need you. And so that was the day I quit my job and took the leap. And that's what it took. And I sat down and I asked myself a few questions coming out. I said, okay, what is it that I do well? What is it that I love doing? What are people coming to me for? And then I answered those questions. And out of that, I started moving into the life coach, brand coach space. And it was me taking those steps, asking myself those questions, that really got me into a space of creating the business that I created. I didn't have the whole picture that I'm in now. And even as I grow in my business and scale it, it develops, it expands, it scales, it pivots. And that's one thing about entrepreneurship that I think people need to understand and know and love, that your business is going to pivot at times, sometimes, and sometimes it may not. But just to be open to the pivots, because that's how you expand. You cannot grow without the pivot. So that's how I got there.
I love it. There was 3 questions that you just asked. I want to highlight that real quick. You said, what is it that I do well? Was it, what do I love to do? The next question. Yep. And the third one was, what are people coming to me for?
Yep. And
that's perfect.
You put those in a pot and mix them up like gumbo, somewhere in there, you're going to get a good meal.
I love it. I mean, it's funny. I don't think we've ever talked about this before too. I mean, for me, it's always been, what do I know? Who do I know? And where can I grow?
Oh,
those
nice.
were the 3 questions I came with, because that was the same thing for me. I was like, I have no idea what my skill set is. I don't even know what entrepreneur. Just like you, I had nobody in my family that was an entrepreneur. Basically, folks had jobs. And that's all I knew. I thought at 31 years old, the only way for life to happen was to continue this corporate ladder thing. And I guess my question for you is, I see a lot of people struggle because they're fearful of kind of committing to a plan, because if it doesn't work out. What have you learned on your journey about commitment to a plan, and how can we think about that when it comes to really designing 2022 for ourselves?
Oh man, that's good. So that's one of the things I love to talk about, is people get so committed to a plan. So your question was, I just want to make sure I'm not creating my own question and answering your question.
Specific and direct.
Specific and direct. So concisely and precisely to answer your question. Chris, you can't drink while you're talking to me now.
You're giving me PTSD from Clubhouse. You have 30 seconds to condense 2 hours.
30 seconds. So the question is specifically, what are my thoughts about people who need to commit to the plan when it comes to their business, or just the thoughts
So
about that in
I think
general?
I mean business can fit in, but I mean thinking about looking at your year in 2022, I
Sure.
think oftentimes we don't know what we don't know, so we're creating a plan. Like you said, pivoting is so crucial, but maybe we're fearful to commit to even an end goal because what if we don't get there?
Yeah.
And we abandon the plan, but then we don't have good data points or we don't have any experiences to go back to and say maybe we could have made a different decision. And that's where I think a lot
Mm-hmm.
of folks struggle.
Mm-hmm. So I'll start by saying this. There's so many things I want to say about that, but I'm going to try to narrow it down to a very concise and clear thought. Is that is that the beautiful thing about life is that I think it's important to remember is that this is just a journey for us. That life is a journey, not a destination. I'll quote India Ari in one of her songs, Beautiful Day. Life is a journey, not a destination, right? And so at the end of the day, it's about the experience and what we're in and how we're doing it and how we make best of where we are. I recently took a trip to Sedona, and I probably had one of the most significantly spiritual experiences in Sedona, Arizona, of my life. So much so that it inspired this recent tattoo that I got on my left arm, right? Two of them. And um and the one of not the one of the biggest messages and takeaways from that magical land of Sedona and that experience that we had there at that retreat was that I felt expansive and connected to everything in this earth, but I also felt attached to nothing,
Mm.
right? And so I didn't feel attached to the outcome of things. I came back with this expansiveness of knowing that I'm connected to every single thing on this planet, every single person, every single like energy, just we're connected. Like the magnitude in which we are connected is miraculous, right? But then also being able to say that I don't have to be attached to the outcome. Does this relationship have to work? What is this relationship here to teach me? What is this experience here to teach me? What is this thing here to teach me out of curiosity? I had the pleasure of meeting Elizabeth Gilbert, the lady who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, and it was about her life. And I got to experience her magical energy. And she was at a luncheon that I was escorting her to the stage where she was going to speak. And um, in her speaking, she mentioned that she started looking at things with a curiosity. That when her best friend, who she was in love with, died, and she was with a man that she loved, and she had to look at him and say, I need to take a break here and be with this friend who I'm in love with as she transitions. That when she died, that she just looked at everything with a curiosity to say, wow, that's interesting. What is this here to show me and teach me? And the reality is that every single thing that happens in life goes back to us.
Mm.
Everything reflects back to us. Every single thing. Somebody has an attitude, somebody's doing a thing, or we keep attracting a certain type of thing. One, there is the four agreements, right, to not take things personally, because if somebody affects you in a way, then 9 times out of 10 it's them. But also, if it triggers you and it gets a reaction out of you while they're going through their own thing of, oh, that's their thing, you have to ask yourself, the way that it bounced off of you, that's for you. It has nothing to do with them. That's for you to say, wait, why did it hit me like that? Why am I feeling this? What is that showing me? What is my body telling me that I need to pay attention to? What in me is not healed at this moment, right? You completely detach from them because what they did, they're just a tool, right? They're just energy bouncing around, and when the energy hits you, it's your job to determine how you receive the things that are happening in life. And what we do so quickly is we attach it to the person. We take it personal. We run with it. And so, really, about the thing about being attached to a plan is really just understanding that this journey in life is just a journey. So, when things don't go as planned, that you be able to have that flexibility to say, oh, well, that's not it. Well, let's be open to what it is, right? And we have to practice not being attached to the outcome, because while we can be connected to things and people and everything in the most loving way, we get to decide how we show up in that space. But we don't have to be attached to controlling an outcome, because it goes back to control. And realistically, we control nothing. Nothing. Not
The
nothing.
only certainty in life is that everything is uncertain.
Listen, absolutely. Absolutely.
That idea of curiosity is, and I'm sitting here like, if you could see me in person, I'm sitting here staring at the ceiling, listening to you talk, just letting your
Aw,
words permeate as if I'm listening to like an affirmation on YouTube right now.
I knew that. Well, let me write that down. That's what I'm doing
Yeah,
next.
yeah, I'm taking notes, so I got you wholeheartedly. Just focus on where you're at. But yeah, that idea of curiosity, I heard Dr. Zach Bush in an interview talk about. He's a cancer researcher, but he talks about the cure for cancer being in ecstatic experiences. And he said in his own life there was a point where he was in private clinical practice and he was so depressed that he was, ready to take his own life. He'd planned it, he'd done all this stuff, and he went
Mm,
by chance to an acupuncturist showed up out of nowhere, and did an acupuncture session with him. And he said he was looking up at the sky and he was looking at a cloud. And it was the first time in his life that somebody told him to just simply lay there and do nothing. And he looked at this
yes.
cloud and he was like, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And so he started to think that depression is when we lack curiosity.
Mm,
And when you keep talking about curiosity and you're connecting it the way that you are to our sense of direction and falling in love with the journey and not the outcome, I tend to get to that point of, I felt the most depressed at a time when I had no aim, I had no direction. And I was just kind of just in a hypnotic rhythm of just falling into things and hoping for the best. And it's super fascinating that you start to draw this link with curiosity. And I'm also super stoked to hear about this spiritual experience you had in Sedona.
oh man, that's a whole nother. You don't have another. We have to have another 30 minutes for that. Like it's a story.
We'll have to do it in a full podcast episode because I
Chris, I'm
definitely want to
telling
dive into
you.
that. Yeah,
I'll just tell you this. I had my first experience with psychedelics, right?
nice.
In a spiritual setting,
Mm-hmm.
and it completely changed me.
Mm.
Completely. Hmm.
Is this since we last spoke?
This was Halloween weekend, so it was the end of
Oh wow.
October.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So
this is super recent.
yeah.
Oh, this is so
Hmm.
great. I can't wait to talk to you more about this. This is fascinating.
Hmm.
Love it. So we've covered quite a bit, and I think that we talked about three questions. Which, if you're listening or just joining us right now, we have close to 100 people who've listened live so far. But I asked Miranda, what were three questions or some questions or things that she did to help herself transition from her job in 2018, and she said, "What is it that I do well? What do I love to do? And what are people coming to me for?" And I think those are three phenomenal things that we can sit down with, especially if you're somebody transitioning out of your job or thinking about it. And the idea that the shift has to go from the destination into the journey and really falling in love with the journey, and that work of really releasing our expectation of the outcome, which is a lifelong journey. But curiosity, coming up, and I love that Dr. Elizabeth talked about reflection. You're talking about questions as well. And so what for you is, and I'm going to take Dr. Elizabeth's question. How is 2022 going to be your masterpiece of a year?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, this year is going to be about, I heard somebody recently say this, and so I can't take credit for it. I would like to steal it, but this app is so small, and I think I even heard them say it on this app today. But for me, it's going to be a year of intimacy.
Mm,
And what they said was, they said that when you think about the word intimacy, it's intimacy, right?
hmm
To see into myself. And but it clung to me when they said it so much, because that I had already settled in myself that that's what I was going to go into 2022 doing, is to sit with myself enough to be able to trust and hear my voice enough so that my intuition can guide me for the duration of next year, that I let less things on the exterior affect my own intuition that was God given, that tells me what I need, when I need it, and how I need it. And that I take the things that are happening exterior and I use them and I bring them in and say, does this serve me? Is this something I need? And if it doesn't, then I let it wash out, right? And so for me, the year of 2022 is going to be a year of really getting back to guarding my gates, the gates to my heart, the gates to my intuition and my spirit, which are the three things, which is what I see, what I say, and what I hear. So on a regular basis, I'm going to spend time guarding what I see, what I say, and what I listen to. And I want to make sure that, because we're like a ATM, so whatever we put in, it comes out, right? And so I really want to be very conscious of what I'm putting into myself. Intuitively, I want to listen to things that my body needs. I remember when I first started my business, I was feeling real slum and down, and I was going through some things when I first started my business. So I needed a kick in the ass. I needed like Gary V type energy. I needed like Les Brown type energy. I needed like, so I was listening to a lot of that. And then after a while, Chris, it no longer served me. It didn't mean that
Yeah.
something was wrong with Gary and Les and how they did it. I just didn't need that type of tone and energy anymore. I needed something different. And so I intuitively stopped listening to them, and I found the thing that served me. And so I am going to get into the space of, again, not being having to be attached to them, a thing that doesn't belong to me anymore, serve me anymore, to the outcome, and say, man, I love Gary Vee. I want to keep loving him forever. I can still love him. I just don't need to listen to him right now because I can't take it. My spirit isn't. So intuitively asking myself, what vibration do I need in this moment? What do I need to help lift me up? Really paying attention to the things that I say, right? I think that starts with the thoughts, not being attached to your thoughts, because after you have thoughts, then it controls the things that come out of your mouth. And then taking it a step further, it can, being able to write those things. Once I align my thoughts in a good space with what my mouth is saying, then I need to write those things down, because there's so much power in writing, right? I could really go into that, but I know we're just doing the quick answer here. And so really thinking about what I'm writing on that thing. And then also the last part is what am I seeing, which is so important, because I think seeing goes beyond just vision boards. It goes beyond, it extends into traveling. What you're putting your eyes on, beautiful sceneries, being in nature, connecting to things. Like you said, this guy taking a moment to just sit still and do nothing and look at the clouds, or in other spaces to be around people who are successful in the way that you want. We spend so much time focusing on the things that we don't want, right? Because a lot of my clients do that. I'll talk about social media and they'll start telling me, man, I don't want to be this way. I don't want to look like this person. I don't want, and I'm like, yo, but can you tell me what you do want to look like? And then there's
No.
a pause and there's nothing. And you know why there's nothing? Because they haven't spent any time really paying attention to what they really want. So their focus is solely drawn to the things that they're disgusted by. And it rules how they show up in this world. And
No.
so I am going to spend time focusing on people who are successful, people who are loving, people who are in this space, because then we have to shift our body and ask ourselves, because again, it goes back to us, right? And then I'm gonna stop here. It goes back to us that if like, let's say I want to be in a loving relationship with somebody, let's say I want my business to be wildly successful. If something in me cannot look at another person that is madly in love and admire it and desire for it, or look at somebody who is wildly successful and I can't stand to look at it for a long time, then it's not about them. It goes back to me. I need to spend time and go within myself and ask myself, what isn't healed in me that is not allowing me to enjoy the beauty of seeing this in somebody else so that I can have it for myself? So for me, it's going to be about intuitive shifting, but guarding my gates so that my intuition is right on point and leading me to where I need to be. I hope
Well,
that
my
answered
friend,
your question.
I think it gave me plenty to reflect on. I mean, the year of 2022 being all about intimacy for you, I think is absolutely beautiful. And first and foremost, just on a selfish note, I'm super stoked to talk to you about your experience. And I feel like
Listen.
there's so much more for us to dive into. And you are somebody for sure that I've really, really appreciated the friendship that we created. And from the moment that we hopped in that first Zoom call, we brought some people together from Clubhouse, and we were like, how can we
Yeah.
really develop an experience? And the way you not only were there listening and providing space, but also what you did afterwards was the most impressive thing I've seen.
Oh,
And you've been somebody I listen to. You said, who do you listen to? I'm the same way. I guard, and it's not that I guard. It's that people have recommend books and all kinds of stuff to me, and I'm like, listen, I did the ingesting people's ideas, and I think for me, I have so many of my own ideas. I need them to be crystal clear so I can share them with the world and be around people who aren't trying to change my ideas, but rather asking me great questions based on who I am to express them better. And
yeah.
you're somebody who does that, and that's why if you're listening, you need to have people like a Miranda in your life who doesn't change your
Oh,
idea, but rather helps you express your ideas in the best version possible. So I just want to reflect that back to you and share so much love and gratitude for you being here. And how was the hot seat in the living room tonight? Was it okay?
I loved it, loved it, loved it. And I just want to throw this. I see the timer above my head going, and so I just want to toss out this book recommendation because you're on books. The Will Smith audio, like his book, Will. If you want to buy the book, that's fine for nostalgic reasons, but the audio book will blow your mind. It is hands down one of the best audiobooks I've ever listened to in my life.
Dig
Okay.
it. Where can people reach you real quick?
They can reach me at my website at marandajoiner.com, MarandaJoiner, or on Instagram. That's where I live most of the time. It's just my name, Maranda Joiner, Marandajoiner. It's the same name on all platforms. You can find me there.
Love it. Thanks so much for being here tonight, my friend. I can't wait to dive deeper.
Love you. Bye.
Love you. I'll talk to you soon. Oof. What an episode so far, folks. I mean, these are people that I have a tremendous amount of love. I consider them family, and each one of them, I'm taking notes. So again, I'm asking questions, stream of consciousness, but I can't help but again go back to the idea. There's parallels between people who are creating with intention in their lives, between Dr. Elizabeth and Maranda here, and Maranda of all people should definitely have this gold badge or whatever here on Wisdom. Just because of the expertise that she has. And I love what she shared about the idea of looking at everything with curiosity, to really look at everything as a journey, not a destination. I couldn't agree anymore. But the three things that she said to ask yourself right now, and I know there's some people out in the audience who are listening, and if you're listening to the podcast, a lot of people are transitioning like I did in 2016 from my corporate job. She transitioned in 2018. The three questions, again, are what is it that I do well? What do I love to do? And what are people coming to me for? I think that sets us up for a beautiful conversation. We have two more guests for tonight. We're going for 2 hours. And again, this is a special recording of the Connection Point. Last week, we did our episode all about the gift of giving. That, since it was recorded here on the Wisdom platform, has gotten almost 300 additional plays, which is wild to think about, in addition to the additional plays on the podcast platforms on iTunes and Spotify. It has been a beautiful thing to bring the ideas that we're bringing to Wisdom, to Clubhouse, and all the various social audio platforms. Our goal is to create a social audio movement. And that's what we're here to do. Is you have a story, I want to help you tell it. We want to make the meaningful marketable. But I am so happy to bring my good friend Joshua Hinkson into the living room. He is no stranger to social audio, and especially we've had so many great conversations here on Wisdom and on Clubhouse. He is a rising star, and I am the president of his fan club. So if you want to find your membership, and I know he's probably laughing right now before I bring him up, what you want to know about Joshua, aside from being ruggedly handsome, is that he is an award-winning actor and filmmaker. He's been a part of The Bates Motel, Van Helsing, Carried Away, Nancy Drew. He says, I create stories that lean into the discomfort with a loving intention to evolve the conversations we have in the world. And I get to bring this man up, joining us all the way from the west coast of Canada into the living room. We're going to talk to him about designing his 2022. What's up, brother?
I was definitely laughing. I'm not going to lie.
I know. I can feel it. I can sense it.
Just ridiculous. But anyways, amazing. How are you, brother?
How are you, man? I'm great.
I'm good.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing good, man. It's been an incredible past handful of days. So yeah, I feel very good. Yeah.
Dig it, man. What just happened that transpired for the last 30 seconds was like the equivalent of that weird ass out hug you give somebody you don't really know that well.
Yeah, it totally was. Or when you're trying to say goodbye, but you still keep walking down the same path with that person. It's like,
Or you give that weird like side hug thing that you do,
Oh, it's the worst.
Hello,
that should
man.
be banned from like ever existing in the world ever again. It's like, if you can't give somebody a proper hug, like just don't do it or just don't. Wrap the arms around, embrace that person, let your hearts touch, and step back and just, or just don't touch the person.
Well, you're touching a lot of people right now through social audio, man. Your star is rising. You're hosting spaces. Can you talk, for those who don't know the kind of spaces you've been hosting on Clubhouse, I think it's worth mentioning. What is the intention? And you've chosen some very particular topics. Can you share a little about that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I always wanted to, I guess, have more heart intentioned. I've always wanted to have and engage in more heart intention conversations with people. As you know, for an example, a simple example is instead of how are you doing, it's how's your heart doing? And that's kind of initially how it started. And, we have a great little group that is, slowly growing, but which is Lovely Humans Unite. And it's really just getting together and creating and holding space with people who lead with their hearts. And they may not know that stepping into the room, but for whatever reason, there's something about the frequency of that space that pulls people in and allows them or gives them the feeling of being in a safe space where they can be held and not judged, and they can share whatever's going on in their heart, or the last conversation that we had that you were a part of is, we accept the love we think we deserve, and exploring what that means to people. From vulnerability to, all things related to the heart. And that's really what ultimately drives me, especially when, I live by a very simple philosophy in that what comes from the heart goes to the heart. I'm not interested in how busy you are or what you've achieved. I want to know the strings of your heart and what makes you you.
Mm. With that being said, I think that we deal with some strong intention of like how you're choosing to live your life and how you're creating it. And you are somebody who creates experiences in film. How does that parallel with your life? Like, do you think about the story that your life is unfolding into, or is it something that you feel like you're kind of involved in as a greater picture?
I've always subscribed since it was introduced to me, but the notion or the idea of, and this is a very, this is like my friends in Israel, who are incredibly spiritually aligned, brought this to my attention, and that, your story's already written in the stars. You're just figuring it out as you go along. And so I've never been one that has subscribed to the 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10-year goal plan. Because I can tell you what, nobody in 2015 who mapped out their 5-year goal plan got it right. And if you predicted 2020, then you're a fucking genius. But also, like, damn you. You know what I mean? It's just like, I don't have control over 2 minutes from now. So for me, it's, I'm figuring it out as I go along. And because and I try to be as present. I mean, presence is such a huge thing for me, and surrendering to being present, and being aware of when I am and when I'm not, and always trying to return to that compass point that Dr. Elizabeth spoke about, right? And trusting my heart and my intuition, and knowing that ultimately they always lead from a place of truth. And so I'll follow my heart and my intuition to the end of my days, because they're much smarter and much wiser than my brain could ever be, no matter how much information I consume and digest and process and add to my tool belt that makes me, who I am. My heart and my gut are always my priority.
So talk to me a little bit more about that. So are you saying that you don't really set particular goals or milestones? You're particularly looking at like an experience you want to have? Like, walk me through that a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, my life is very intentional, but I don't know that until I have a project per se built in terms of like a script property. Only then will I start putting milestones in place in order to drive the project to completion, because you need it. But in terms of my own life outside of the projects that I build and create, yeah, I don't know that I have any really milestones other than I always strive, and especially so when I was 39, I turned 40 on Friday the 13th of December in 2019, which I was pretty excited about. I love my Friday the 13th birthdays, but going when I turned 39, I wanted to enter my 40s in the best possible shape that I had ever been in, mentally, emotionally, physically. And so I suppose through my 40s, that is the driving force in my life. And I want to enter each new year better than where I entered it. So whatever that looks like in terms of focusing on my physical health and pouring back into my body through the gym or acupuncture or physio or what I need to do in order to heal my body, rest, nutrition, or an acupuncture ties into my emotional and intellectual expansion as well. And therapy or working with my shaman that I work with. So for me, it's that is the milestone that I am constantly in search of, and in pursuit of, is just being, there's a couple catchphrases that I've come across over the years, like only the best make it this far, or like better than I was yesterday, but not yet the man I am meant to be, or certain things like that really feel aligned and congruent with my heart. And yeah, I want to be the best possible version of me for myself, but also for my friends and my family and whatever potential partner or partners I have in my life.
Love it, man. There's also the possibility you're going to spend some time in Europe next year. Talk to me about
Yep.
that.
Yeah, I mean, I can't wait to return back to Iceland to start, but we'll see where else I end up. But Iceland is a very special, sacred place to me, and my best friend, one of my very best friends, lives in Iceland, and so there's just something. I have like an incredible group of like an unofficial extended family over there who have really wholeheartedly embraced me as one of their family. And so travel was such a huge part of my life pre 2020, and it's something that I have really longed for in every direction that you could possibly interpret that word. Like I long for it in my bones to get on a plane go out and explore the world and meet people and learn about new people I'd never knew existed before, new cultures, new experiences. That is, to me, why I do what I do, is to get out in the world and see something differently that I didn't know before existed, until I had that experience leave an impression on my heart. And I think that's the best education for me, because look, man, I didn't even finish high school, in all honesty. And I have no interest in returning. I don't need my GED in order to quantify my value in this world. But my education was from traveling the world. That's to me, like, taught me so much about things that I it's hard for me to put words to, but until you are in that experience and you have that in your bone marrow, it's like grief, or it's like love. Like, we could read Plato and Rumi and Tagore and Deepak Chopra all we want, but until you have that experience and know what that feels like on an energetic level, you can't put words to it. You either know what it is or you don't.
Yeah, it's one of those things where so many people are willing to have an opinion, but very few go seek out the truth.
Yeah, totally, brother.
Yeah.
Totally.
That's a big one, man.
Right?
How do you choose? Well, first and foremost, I asked the question earlier. Have you seen that movie, Life Itself?
No, I have not yet.
Dude, I think it'd be something that you would really, really enjoy.
Have you seen Come On yet?
I haven't yet. We need to put that on our list, Kasha and I, so we can watch it. And we started our Instagram account so we can share our thoughts about
that movie. That movie will blow your heart open, man.
This movie we just watched, Life Itself, really did the same thing.
Yeah.
I want to see this too. It's just one of those things. Like, the first 30 minutes are like some of the most intense emotional experiences you can possibly have in a cinema, and so much foreshadowing too. And it has a lot to do with mental health, and then this intertwining of narratives amongst generations. But I've always had this question for you, which is, how do you choose in the industry that you're in as an actor and a filmmaker? Like, what roles do you want to take on, and what do you have to prepare yourself for in terms of embodying a character? Small question.
I mean, look, at the end of the day, ultimately, there's one purpose for me, and that is to find the humanity of that character. That's always what I'm after. Is, how do I make this person human? Even if they're, a convicted killer, or, it's, some kind of Hallmarky thing, which has usually significantly less substance to work with. But, it's just, I don't spend too much time focusing on the particular character per se, as I do trying to map out that person's DNA and their story, and conveying that on camera. So even if, the perspective of society looks at that individual and is like, that's a shitty human being. But if I can give you a reason, and for myself included, to approach each character with free of judgment, and to see, like, if they are what would be deemed a terrible person, find out what made them a terrible person, and then present you with something that may make you uncomfortable and empathize with that individual. That's my job. Is to infuse every character and every word with humanity, so that I don't want to play or cater to the obvious and or the expected. That's not my job. Or that, at least that doesn't turn me on creatively. So how can I take all the experiences and the crucibles that I've been through and all the alchemy that I've experienced and put that into the work? so that you look at something a little differently after having watched whatever project I'm involved with than you had before you started it.
You have to know what my next question is, don't you?
No, I have no idea. But one little addition to that, something that I've always aligned with, and something that's always spoken to me was the fool. And the fool back in the day in the Elizabethan court were the most socially aware people of the court. They knew everything that were happening on the low end of the scale to the upper echelon of the court and the kingdom. And they knew everything that was happening. And it was their job to reflect that in a playful way back to the subjects of the court. And so that's ultimately like, I've been I've been through some the rugged parts of the streets to having being at dinners with highly esteemed accomplished individuals. So it's like, and I pay attention to it all. You have to be. And what you touched on earlier in terms of the curiosity, like I'm insatiably curious. You have to be. The complacency to me is such a slow death. To take things for granted, to take yourself for granted. Like always be curious, always want to know more. You're not always going to know everything. That's fine. But like always be interested in wanting to know more. Go dig a little deeper, be a little bit more uncomfortable. Find a little bit more freedom, find a little bit more strength, find a little bit more love, embody these things. Like it's always all accessible to us at all times. So how could you not be curious about life and the world that you live in? How can you not, like, when you're like staring, like when you talked about the guy who had the acupuncture experience looking up at the cloud, right? It's the same every time. Like I go outside at night and I look up, and if it's a clear night and I see stars, like my mind is just like, it blows me away. The marvel of it, the possibility of, being one grain of sand in a Sahara desert of sand granulates. You know what I mean? We're but one. So
Yeah.
to know anything too kind of absolute, I don't know. There's always room to discover more, I think.
It's being a drop in the ocean itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love our conversations because I have I have to put a bookmark, and I'm like, I'll come back to that because this is going to be good. So there's two things, right? I think what's super fascinating about what you said about the fool is they say that the wise king always pays attention to what the fool says, and people would disregard, the fool, but there's the idea of being foolish and being curious and allowing yourself to be that is there's some deep philosophical understanding there that I think is fascinating and requires maturity to understand that. But the question I was going to ask you earlier is, you said it's your job to find the humanity in the characters that you play.
Mm-hmm.
My question for you is, how are you finding the humanity in Joshua Hinkson?
Ooh.
You had to know that was
coming. That was a gentle one. that was a defibrillator. How do I find the humanity? From being insatiably curious, dude. From life experiences. I don't know if I'm addressing the question in kind of the right abstraction, but or if maybe because now I'm heading in a different direction, and like, how do I find my own humanity? How do I feel about my own humanity? Is that what you're asking?
Well, I
or
mean,
was I going in the right
so
way?
I guess it's kind of interesting, right? Because you're saying that these roles that you play, your job is to portray the humanity in this character, regardless
Mm,
of, what the experience has been or what this person has done. I think
mm,
it becomes really interesting around this idea that, Dr. Elizabeth earlier in the show talked about waking up and meeting herself every single day.
mm,
If we wake up every single day and we allow ourselves to meet ourselves and being curious and allowing yourself to go seek that truth about yourself, how do you
mm.
begin to start applying to your own life that which you do for the characters that you play?
Well, I don't think I could play the characters I played if I wasn't already applying that to my own life. Um, I don't know that I don't know that there's anything necessarily that I've learned, but I love that Dr. Elizabeth identified that because I feel like I'm discovering who I am in every moment. I'm
Mm,
still like, and I talked about this with Jacqueline earlier, and that like I still don't know who I am. I still don't know what I'm capable of. I know I'm an extraordinary man with a big heart with infinite potential. Um, and but I'm still figuring that out moment to moment, man. Which I'm always learning. I'm always discovering. I'm in a nonstop cycle of discovery and trying to understand and become more aware and try to embody, things that feel congruent with my heart. Um, and I'm discovering the step backs too when I step out of alignment. Um, there's just that's always kind of been my journey and my process. I don't know how else to go about life and living, man. This is the only way that kind of makes sense to me. And just always being a student, always looking at things from that gaze, not thinking that I know more than, and just like what you guys were talking about before I came up here, like, um, just always being curious to learning and knowing more. I feel
mm,
like I'm kind of, at the risk of being redundant, but that's just, yeah, that's what drives me and the work I do, right? But I don't think I could do the work I do if I didn't embody the experiences and or the qualities that I already have. I wouldn't be able to, it's like somebody trying to do a grieving scene without having ever experienced grief.
mm.
You're not going to discover what grief is through doing that work. That still will give you no idea what grief is actually like, where you feel that in your bones, in the pit of your stomach, in your eyes, because you just like, you have no, like, you've cleared out your tear ducts and your eyes are so dry that they're like burning. You could never learn that by doing the work until it's actually touched your life.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Yeah.
It's a really big one. So as we
But
as we come into closing our time together, and we have one more
mm,
guest for tonight, which just so you know, if you're listening in live, in these special talks, I bring in a curated list of guests, and we've heard from Dr. Elizabeth Lindsay earlier today, our good friend Maranda Joiner, and now Joshua, and I have our good friend Jon Stern coming up next before we close out for tonight. Do you have a specific process, or maybe even a starting point, a question or a reflection that you use to kind of look at your next year? Or is it something that you say, hey, listen, I'm just curious as to what happens where my heart leads me?
yeah, I'm just curious to see where my heart leads me, brother. I'm open to whatever the universe or the creator, or whatever your abstraction is, has in store for me.
Mm,
And I welcome it with an open heart and an open mind. One of the things that I am doing going into the last few days of this year is doing some inner child work. And this is something that recently is just kind of spoken to me, and not something that I've ever addressed, but just going in with an open heart and having that conversation with my younger self for the first time ever. And taking whatever experience comes out of that and carrying that into the new year. And I'm sure I'll discover deeper layers of love and self-awareness and embodiment, but I'm just excited to get back out into the world, and hopefully to meet up with you and see some of my dear friends around the world, and just take it as it comes, because that's I don't know. I mean, that's all that I think we can really do. And I think that was really reinforced in the last 2 years. So I hope more people are realizing that. And I think that speaks to what you were kind of acknowledging at the initial insertion of or creation of this conversation, right?
100%.
People are slowing down and having to figure that out and deal with that for the first time in a long time.
That is 100% true, man. It's going to be a whole new world, and so much is shifting and changing, man. But I'm excited to have some further discussions with you as we do some more of these kind of planned conversations and dive a little bit deeper. Where can folks connect with you best from here?
I'm not the best at responding on social, but you can find me at Josh Hink, Hink. I don't know why I didn't spell my full name. My parents gave me shit for that for a while. They're like, "Do you not want to be? Are you trying to disown your family name?" And anyways, it was a thing for a bit. But yeah, Josh Hink on Instagram. I think it's Joshua Hinkson on Clubhouse, and or you can find me walking on your coattails wherever you or Damien go. So here I am. But dude, look, I love you, man. I really truly appreciate the spaces you create for these types of conversations to take place, and the people that you have these conversations with, and I'm honored to have been asked to be a part of this one. And yeah, man, nothing but love. Thank you so much.
I love it, man. Thanks so much for being here, man. It means a lot. All right, fellas, ladies and gentlemen, this has been an incredible conversation. I'm going to go ahead and move Joshua back down. And so, what a night so far. It has been an unbelievable honor to spend time so far. We've had Dr. Elizabeth Lindsay with us. We've got my good friend Miranda Joiner. It's her first time. I got my friend Jon here waiting to come up. I know folks, live on Wisdom are looking to join us, and I really appreciate it. This has been a special recording of the Connection Point podcast. We did our live episode last week on the gift that you're giving and the art of giving last week, and it was wildly successful. We hit the #1 trending show on the platform last week. I can't imagine that folks wouldn't find tremendous value out of what Dr. Elizabeth and Miranda and Joshua just shared with us in terms of how they approach, really life and how they're designing their lives. It's all about the idea of intention and how they're leading. I do have my next guest before we wrap up for the evening. And again, the live recording of this will be put together for our regular serialized sequence of the Connection Point, which you can find on iTunes and Spotify. You can also connect with me on Instagram. You can find that as well at iamchrisdelaney.com for any support, where we dive deep into these topics. It's all about finding the connection between all of us in our brands, business, and lives, and how we choose to live our lives with love, intention, vision, and embodiment. Our next guest, which I'm extremely excited to bring up, is somebody, if it was not for him, and I keep saying this, I would not be where I am currently sitting in terms of on Wisdom. I would have never taken the time to explore Clubhouse, and therefore would have not touched over 14,000 people on that platform. But the community that we have right now wouldn't necessarily exist. The business partner that I have wouldn't have existed, and my girlfriend wouldn't have existed because I met her on Clubhouse as well. So this man has a deep place in my heart. He opened a room on Clubhouse called Let's Shoot the Shit. It was one of the first rooms I was ever part of. This room went on for 27 hours. And it was this thing where you could pop in and pop out. We were talking about things like childhood trauma. We were talking about our businesses, sales, revenue generation, business type stuff. But we also came back to what made us human. And I got to know so many people. I saw the potential of the platform. And it was all because this guy literally just took a chance, started a room, and led with just being human. And the goal in this room, which was hilarious, was you had to talk in the third person, freestyle rap, or tell an embarrassing story about yourself. It really was human beings coming together for the sake of just being human. A little bit about Jon. Jon is no stranger to the tech world. He's been working in technology for over 25 years and lives in San Diego with his wife and 2 young kids. His kids are amazing. He's the co-founder of Ringpin, a platform helping retailers like North Face, Toys R Us, and many others sell from anywhere. It's a really cool concept. I'm super stoked for him to share more about it. He likes to do good work and have fun doing it. He also likes traveling, playing basketball, and hanging out with friends and family. He's incredibly humble. This guy is such a hard worker. And the reason why I love talking to him, we actually just had our first Zoom call the other day. And this guy is risk tolerant. He is willing to go all in on his ideas. He is willing to take the risk. He is leading into a vision, and being around people like that is an absolute key in my life for 2022, is to surround myself with people who are willing to take the risk and go on the journey. And so I want to bring Jon Stern up here and introduce him to everybody. It's his first time on Wisdom, so we've had 2 guests, their first time on the platform. So welcome to the living room, Jon Stern, man. How are you, brother?
Hey, I'm doing well. How about yourself? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. I'm excited to have you here, brother. How are you? You doing all right?
I'm doing great. I'm still, man, that's why I like hanging out with you. Your talks always, stimulate a lot of conversations and thinking, and just your talk with Joshua, before this has me thinking a lot about, what he talked about with being curious and being okay with being the fool. And then secondly, about how you can't find that grief unless you've gone through it. There's no other way to reach that. And both those things just have me deep in thought here as I'm driving home.
Yeah, man. Let's share those thoughts with me. I mean, help us understand what drives Jon. Like what drives you, because you're involved in so much, but yet you also still give to people. So what drives you, man?
Let's ease into that one. We'll go back to what Joshua was talking about. But basically, like, you have to abandon your ego to be okay with, being seen as a fool or being the fool. But I've learned so much just by saying, I don't know, and a lot of times, even on platforms, social audio like Clubhouse that got really exciting and stuff, people wanted to know everything. And if you can abandon your ego and say, I don't know, hey, can you tell me, what does that mean to you? Or what does that mean? No, I've never really heard of that. Can you explain it to me? You can learn so much stuff, but so many people are afraid to do that because they need to be seen as someone that knows everything, that they miss out on all these experiences, all this knowledge, and all these, things that other people can share with them that they wouldn't have if they said, oh yeah, I know all about that or something. So I think being curious and being okay with being the fool is really the key to expanding your knowledge and trying things. Like I tell my kids, I feel like I'm like an explorer because I'm trying to create something new that's never been done before. And if I felt like I already knew everything, it would be impossible to do that type of stuff. So I have to be okay with failing, being okay with being like, oh yeah, I was wrong. I tried it. It didn't work. And if I wasn't okay with that, then I would never be able to do anything new, I don't think.
Mm. Do you think that desire to be on the edge of things kind of drives you and what you're attracted to?
Yeah, I don't like standard things that I've already done before. I like to make my own path. I've done that ever since I was a kid. I see that in my kids. So I think that, yeah, it kind of drives me to try and do things a different way or possibly make things better.
Mm. I would definitely share that with you, man. The early adoption and kind of this whole journey of tech. I mean, what is it about tech that keeps you excited about it? Because I mean, you're somebody who's been involved in it for over 25 years. What got you interested in tech, and why do you stick around?
Yeah. I kind of fell into it. My dad had an IT consulting company, so I grew up working for him, at a very young age. We were in the very early networking days and all that type of stuff. And I always thought it was super boring. Never wanted to work in it, never wanted to do it, but I really enjoyed meeting the different types of people that we provided services to. We'd work with real estate firms, we'd work with public relations, law firms, so I'd basically be a part of 20 different companies instead of one company. And I really liked building those personal relationships. And then, I went to college and graduated, and the easiest thing I could do, obviously, was what I've been doing forever. So I started my own company doing IT consulting. And I did that for, maybe 10 or 15 years almost. And then I was like, hey, do I still want to do this, or do I want to do what I really love? And that's why I like the technology part of it, but I really like people and solving people's problems. So it really became, hey, I'm good at technology. How can I use technology to solve people's problems? And that's kind of what brings me to it. It's not really like, oh, I love the latest, iPhone, or I need to see, the latest gadget that's out there. It's really like, hey, is there a new way to do things that could make people's lives better? And because I know about technology, is there a way that I can apply these things that I've learned to, advance someone's life or society or whatever it might be?
Dig it, man. And I think that's so fascinating about you and your curiosity. That's been a theme tonight, across, all three guests that we've had thus far. And my question for you is, what's the biggest, well, let me ask you this question. What's the most difficult lesson you've learned being involved in tech?
That's how much I see a timer.
I don't ask the surface level questions.
Yeah, I mean, there's been so many of them, and it really just depends if it's I've seen so many different things, in a 25-year career in technology, and a lot of them really, the thing that would probably help more than anything would have been if I would have checked my ego many, many years ago. I probably did that more recently. And, I wanted to be right, or I wanted to do things my way instead of just get to the goal or whatever it might be. And that's probably one of the lessons that, I've been taught many times over and over again, and maybe I'm getting better at it and maybe I'm not. But, that you might not always know the way, and you need to be curious, and you need to take other people's opinions. And sometimes you need to check your ego at the door in order for, to benefit the greater good or whatever. And there's tons of lessons about, like overbuilding a product, or, not building what you think is cool, and talking to people first to make sure you're really solving a problem and all that type of stuff. But I think that kind of the ego stuff supersedes it, because it works in every, interpersonal dynamic that you have with a boss or with an investor or with a customer or whatever it might be.
Checking your ego at the door.
I said it would be good. I didn't say I've done that all the time.
Is there a way that you've looked at your life on a yearly basis? I know that especially in the tech world and in Silicon Valley, so many people are so big into goal setting and all kinds of stuff in terms of how they approach stuff. Have you outlined or had any kind of process for yourself of how you look at your year to year? You set resolutions? Do you have a process in place?
No, is the short answer. I mean, I probably should have a lot more, but I've never really done any of that type of stuff for me. I've always just tried to be as happy as I can and kind of spread that happiness throughout my friends and family as much as possible. And, I've been privileged enough that I never really worried. I never kind of chased the dollar. I tried to chase what made me happy and what I was interested in. And probably if I did set out some plans or be like, oh, I want to do this or that, or move to Silicon Valley or whatever it might be, I could be in a different place in my career. But I've always tried to optimize life experiences and happiness for myself and the people around me.
Mm. So you're more so driven by experiences in your life?
100%. I've never had any material goals. I don't care if I wasn't married, I would probably be a pretty poor dresser. I still may already be considered that. But yeah, I don't really care about any of that stuff. I've always tried to travel as much as possible, meet as many people as possible, experience as many different things as possible. So, I never really believed in trying to obtain material things or status in life. Just do the things that I like and that makes me happy and makes the people around me happy.
Mm, I love it, man. I'm the same way. I was talking about this last year, or not last year, last week, in terms of, how we begin to prioritize our lives. For me, the financial side of things, I would always prioritize experiences because, money allows us to do some incredible things and to meet new people and all that good stuff. But, you know, let me shift gears for a second. And can you explain, the vision, kind of how Ringpin kind of became a thing for you? I know that requires so much intention and also a lot of hard work. What is Ringpin and how has it shifted and changed since your initial idea?
It's changed a bunch since the beginning. We started almost 5 years ago, to be totally upfront. My co-founder and I both had other jobs, but we had this, real curiosity for what the future was going to bring as far as communications. And we're like, oh, people are going to want to talk. They're going to want to text. They're going to want to do videos from any device, from anywhere. So we were thinking like, people are stuck in offices, and they're using office phones and all that type of stuff. And that's not what the future is going to be. Like the future is going to be people working from beaches or traveling or from their cell phone or from their iPad. So we started building this omni-channel contact center, and we had a customer in San Diego here that wanted it, and we had a really good use case and everything. And it was about a year build, and they got bought by a private equity firm after about 7 months into the build, and no longer could use what we were building for them. So we're sitting here with this thing halfway built, and we're like, what are we really going to do with it? And we got a few customers on it, and it was working all right, but we weren't really dedicated to it, and it was hard to see how we could turn it into a viable business. So we kind of were playing around with it for years, and my co-founder always wanted to do something in the physical world, bringing digital experiences to the physical world, like through QR codes or something. And I never thought it was viable here in the US, but then the pandemic came around and we realized that people were going to need contactless solutions, and that QR codes may actually have a chance here in the US. So we kind of shifted from this omni-channel communications platform to a physical to digital platform that could help people basically shop or communicate with people from anywhere. So you could throw a QR code on a product in a store and people could scan it and instantly buy that product or read reviews or watch a video or anything. So really we had to take, kind of an opportunistic event, the pandemic, combined with cell phones being able to scan QR codes natively, and that made it a viable option. So I can't tell if my AirPods are still working or not, if you can hear me, but
Oh yeah.
okay, cool. Basically now, we help stores bring any digital tools to their stores. So if you want to shop in a store, buy something instantly without like waiting in line, you can scan the QR code, check out, or you could, look at a t-shirt on a shelf, scan it, see reviews on it, see other sizes. So basically kind of bringing the best of these online worlds to the physical world. So it's really been interesting because we've built things over the years. We built a baseball card platform. Really had the market timing right. And that's what's so exciting now, is that the market is really eating this stuff up at the same time that we're building. Sorry, I had to walk inside. Hold on. Can you take them, please? And that is also one of the biggest. That's also. Sorry, buddy.
Real time, real life, man. I love it.
Yeah. It started raining, so I came inside. But also one of the biggest things is like, hey, even if you build something really cool, you talked about lessons learned in technology. This was one of the biggest. If you build something really cool and no one knows about it, or if the market's not ready for it, it's not going to work. And back in the day, probably before I checked my ego as much, I used to be like, oh, we were so early. We did that before these people. We were doing that first. And now I realize pretty clearly, being that early is actually the same as being wrong. Because if the market's not ready for it, it's not going to work. So I used to take pride in it. And it's like, oh, no, you were a dumbass. And now I actually feel like the market's ready for what we're doing. So that's why I'm so excited heading into 2022.
Yeah, that leads me to my next question, which is about risk. I think it's something that doesn't get talked about often, and I think something that you and I agree with after we had our first Zoom call the other day was you and I are both very risk tolerant. And how does risk play into the decisions that you make? Do you go through a process of any kind that helps you kind of figure out how the risk looks? Is it emotional for you? Is it intuitive? Like how do you look at risk You have a family too. So how do you really make decisions?
Huh. I'm sure you can probably still hear them screaming downstairs. Uh, nothing bad is being done to them. I don't think, but it's a great question, and I don't know if it's fortunately or unfortunately, I have a higher risk tolerance than most people I know, and I've always had that my whole life. And a lot of it has to do with confidence in myself that I'm going to figure it out, you know. So I was able to take risks because I was like, oh, what's the worst that could happen? And I always say, what's the worst that's going to happen all the time? Like when I make decisions, oh, let's hit this button. What's the worst that's going to happen? You know. And I try and do that evaluation. I used to play a fair amount of poker. So, you know, there's always odds in every hand. What's the chance that you win? Does this make sense? Do you have pot odds to do it? All that type of stuff. So you always kind of have to calculate risks in life. And to me, you know, I think as we talked about a few days ago, I'm all in on this thing, you know, like I'm 100% in everything I have financially, everything I have emotionally, my time. Like I could not be more all in on this business. And to me, there was no risk in that. You know, the only risk was if I didn't do that and I took another job working for somebody else and that I lived the rest of my life being like, what if I would have tried going all in on that thing? What would have happened? You know, so if this doesn't work, uh, to me, I'll be okay because I tried and I know I did everything. But if I didn't do this, that was the biggest risk that I ever would have been taking, that I would have had to live the rest of my life being like, what could have happened if I tried this thing?
That's a big one. So it's really thinking about the possibility of what about the regret of having not done this.
I feel like you almost never regret the things you do, and you're going to regret the things that you don't do. You know, so like we were just talking about, my sister was just in town. My grandpa Bud, he was a doctor. He worked until he was 90. He always said, "When in doubt, do," and that's something that I've always tried to live by. Like, you want more experiences in life. If you're not sure, try it, see if you like it. And for me, I could always go get another job for another company. That's something that's always going to be there. But taking a shot at something that we've been thinking about for over 5 years when the market's actually ready, like that's the thing dreams are made of. And even if like my day-to-day life isn't what, you know, you would expect, so a startup founder, you know, it's not particularly glamorous. I've made less money this past year than I have in the past decade. Uh, so, you know, not everything's great, but I couldn't have it any other way.
No. Yeah, I mean, 2018, after my first year, you know, doing the work on my own, you know, I made less money than I did delivering pizzas at 16 in 2018.
Yeah.
You know, it's not glamorous, and I think that you're right. I mean, for me, I love what you said though. You said, "When in doubt, do." Was that it?
That's what Grandpa Bud always used to say. Yep. I can't take credit for
Grandpa Bud is a legend.
it. He is. He really
It's
is.
so good, super simple. Yeah, I mean, one of the questions I ask people when I evaluate kind of like where they're going with their business, and I say to them, you know, let's say everything fails Monday, what do you do? And I know folks are going to make it when they say we try something else.
Yep.
And some other folks, you know, it's they're so emotionally attached, or it's like, you know, well, I don't know. There's kind of that drive that has to happen, and you know, the tech world is so interesting because everybody seems to have the next big idea, the next YouTube, the next Google of something, the next Facebook of something. How do how do you come up with great ideas in the tech world? That's always been something I want to ask somebody who's been in it for a long time.
Well,
Is it
great
just like a
ideas.
smoke session and everybody comes up with some great ideas?
They can come from anywhere, and I've heard so many different founding stories of how companies were started in crazy places and all that type of stuff. But what I've really learned, and you know, goes back to your original question, great ideas don't mean anything. You know, if you have a great idea but you can't execute on it, it's nothing. I actually think back 20 years ago, we had a poker website, and no, it was in 2004, so almost 20 years ago, and we had this big meeting with ESPN, and they wouldn't sign our NDA before the meeting, so I pulled the meeting, and I was like, nah, we're not going to meet with them, because I was like, they're going to copy it. You know, and now I look back and I laugh at that. You know, here, like, I can't believe I didn't go to the meeting with ESPN because they wouldn't sign our NDA. Like, anyone can take your idea and build it. If you're not the best person to build it and execute it on it, then you don't deserve to win with it anyways. So back in the day, we used to be afraid to tell people our ideas because we felt like, oh, they might take it and steal it and build it better. But now I tell everybody exactly what we're doing. And like,
Mm.
hey, if they can build it better and they can do it, then good for them. You know, they deserve to win.
So the ideas like come up all the time. I've had millions of ideas that could have worked if I could have executed them better or something like that, throughout my whole lifetime. So the ideas are really a dime a dozen. It's the team that's able to execute those ideas that are really valuable.
And that right there is something major. Ideas are worth nothing. Execution is worth everything. That's a big one.
Well,
that's a huge one.
I wish it wasn't the case, because I've I've always been good at coming up with ideas, and the execution is a lot harder. But that's what really comes down to it. And you see so many times that there's two companies with the same idea, and you see one win and another lose, and what was the difference there? Same exact idea, and it comes down to their execution. So really, the idea, it's easy to come up with ideas. So many people have ideas that are viable. The real thing is like, hey, is the market opportunity ready for that idea? And there's so many different factors that have to go into it.
And there's something there too, and I'm going a little technical with you just because this is an opportunity for me to kind of geek out and have a selfish conversation about business, because this is the world I live in. But so many people are so fearful of people taking their ideas with NDAs, and they haven't even put any money behind it. They don't have a prototype or anything else. What do you say to somebody who is fearful of getting some advising and some support and doesn't want to share their idea because people don't sign NDAs and they haven't even built a product yet?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a couple cases where that makes sense, but for the most part, I would share with everybody. Like, does anyone really want your idea? Like, is the person that you're talking to, are they really going to go do it? You might have to be careful if you're talking about a really big company that could go and, develop exactly what you're doing. But really, people need to start sharing their ideas, because it does come down to the execution. You never know, that person that you share it with might be the person that's able to help you bring it to life. And I know that's going to go against a lot of things that people say. Make sure you protect everything that you're working on, and don't tell anyone until you know exactly what you're doing, and blah, blah, blah. But really, no one's out here trying to steal your idea. They've probably already had that idea. A bunch of other people have already tried it. You need to have some unique reason that you're going to be able to execute on this idea, or else it's never going to work anyways.
What about partnerships too? Because I feel like a lot of people don't know where to begin, and it sounds like your current company is having a lot of success because of your partnership. How do you evaluate partnership, and what is the first step in really thinking about somebody you should partner with?
Do you mean like co-founder partners, not like technology partners or
Yeah,
whatever?
I would say co-founders, somebody that you really want to build something with.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm almost 45 years old. I've been working in technology since I was about 15. I think there's 3 people in the world that I would start a company with, probably more, a bunch that I haven't met. I mean, 3 people that I know and that I've known for a long time. So for me, it's really hard to find that person, and I don't think that they grow on trees. And there's probably a lot of advice out there. Oh, it's really easy to find a technical co-founder, or it's really easy to find this or that. But you have to think, if you're building a technology project, this is like a 7 to 10 year thing. And it's pretty much, similar to like a work marriage. You need to be able to trust that person. You need to be able to work with them in a productive way for a very long time. There's going to be very hard decisions that you have to make. There's going to be real lows, real high highs, all that type of stuff. So you need a partner that you can do that with. And, frankly, I feel like my co-founder is the best in the world. And that's why I've like gone through great lengths to work with him and done crazy career decisions and stuff like that. But he's that good. So to me, I feel lucky to be able to work with him, and I would do, and I have done, anything to be able to do that. So this is not something to take lightly. This isn't something like you've talked to once on a Zoom. Like, Chris, I loved you the first time I chatted with you. I wouldn't have jumped right into a business with you that first talk just because you lost some pigs in an office. You got to really make sure that you like that person, and that you're going to be able to work with them for a very long time and go through some really hard times. Like when things are easy, it's really easy to get along with people. And when things are going well and the company's making a bunch of money, yeah, wins in sales solve everything. But there's going to be down times for every single company. Not to mention downtimes in your personal life and all that type of stuff, and downtimes in momentum and all that. And you guys and your co-founders really need to compliment you and kind of be able to lift you up when you need it, and you need to be able to lift them up when they need it. And it's not something to just jump into. So you basically have to think like, hey, would I date this person? Would I marry this person? Because it's going to be about that long of a relationship, if not longer, than the average dating life cycle or marriage life cycle even.
Yeah, I think that's really sage advice. I look at it the same way in terms of the marriage piece. And, for those listening, like I've always said, if there's family and stuff happening in the background of social audio, I like that because it tells me that people have lives and that there's life happening. But how do you treat your family, as part of your co-founding, team?
You know what? It's a mine's probably different than most people. They're locked in the basement right now, so we can't hear them. Actually, it sounds like they're upstairs. But I try and involve them as much as possible, and sometimes that bites me in the ass, and sometimes it's really good. But my wife can get emotionally involved in deals that we're working on, and if they don't go through, I might have to like pick her up or something, which can be really hard because I'm pissed about it not going through or whatever it might be. But my kids, I have a 6 and a 3-year-old. Um, my daughter, who's 6, has joined me on Zooms and like helped position the product. And I've made like little commercials using them. They make explainers explaining QR codes, and we do fake YouTube videos all the time that they make.